You mentioned mobile phones.
Yeah.
Nowadays, people are using IoT devices, which are even worse.
Well, I won't use that term.
I know that's
I
what I was.
speak of
I
the,
always wait for you to
yeah.
give me some term.
I talk about the Internet of Stings, cheaters, and spies and
So,
telemarketers.
the Internet of Things, they are becoming so pervasive. I mean, these whether it's thermostats or the
You don't have
doorbells.
to have, most houses don't have them.
Most houses do have them. It's going to be a $13 billion industry.
Well,
I cover Internet of Things, so it's a big, massive industry.
people should not buy any of those things.
Yeah, I understand
The
your point.
only computerized appliances you should use are those with free software that talk only to your computer. That's what it takes for them to be ethical. A very limited purpose device, you may not care whether it has software in it. If the software is never going to be upgraded and it can't talk to anything except your controller, it doesn't matter to you whether it's software or a circuit, they're equivalent. So if you get a controllable light bulb and it talks to a controller and the controller is run by free software, you don't have to care what's in the light bulb. But other than that, these devices are malicious and dangerous and unjust. Anything that can have non-free software in it and talk to the internet is an injustice.
Most of these devices run on Linux kernel.
It doesn't matter if they've got
There's
some free
yeah.
software. What matters is whether they have some non-free software, because that's enough to put a malicious feature into.
Right, that is the easy answer. But as I said, the market is growing. The answer that I'm looking from you is that what can we do instead?
Don't buy them is what you can do. I'm serious. We have to develop the strength to say no. People who haven't got the courage to say no and make it firm are going to surrender their freedom.
Let me give you an example.
Businesses are great, are expert at manipulating people into the point where it will take firmness to say no. And at that point you lose unless you have courage, unless you have firmness.
Some people see a lot of advantages of these devices.
People who think that practical advantages are more important than freedom are going to lose their freedom. Stop thinking about what they think. To hell with them. If they are ready to give up their freedom, I can't stop them. I'm going to talk to the people who value freedom enough to make a sacrifice for it.
Let's take example of a big giant boat, okay? There are 100 people in that boat. Out of those 100 people, 70 people are poking a hole in that boat. You are one guy who says, no, I will not poke a hole, and you have 20 people with you.
What's your point?
The point is that if the boat is going to sink with the rest of them, I am going to sink too. So how can I, and those people are not going to stop. So what
I am going to get out of that boat if necessary.
Yeah.
If I'm going to do my damnedest to convince people to fight for their freedom, and if I lose, I will protect myself as much as I can. I won't have any of those devices in my house.
I'm looking at a different solution. Let's look at airlines or airplane, okay? We trust the airplane, but because of regulations, because of technologies, because of pressure, we have made it secure. So can there be a way that we can use this?
I'm not talking about security,
I'm
please.
not, I'm just giving,
I'm sorry.
Can you let me build the context?
We're totally miscommunicating.
I'm not talking about that security. Can you let me build the context,
Yeah.
please? So what I'm saying is that, is there a way through free software, or as you said in the beginning, that the companies who do free software work are more ethical than the... So I'm talking all this because of some context. I'm not jumping at you. So you have to listen to me. You have to listen to me also.
I understand.
You have to listen to me. Listen to me too. So what I'm saying is that, is there any way that from the technology perspective, we can use free software, at the same time, we can also build companies who believe in free software, so even if they do deploy these IoT devices or more, they are ethical companies, they are not stealing, they are not spying on you.
I don't know. I'm not.
Have you heard of a company called
businessman.
Purism?
Yes.
What do you think about them?
I'm not a businessman.
What do you
Please,
think about Purism?
don't change the subject
I'm not
now.
changing the subject.
They're not building these Internet of Things devices as far as I know.
They're building mobile phone. They're building mobile phone.
Yes. Please, I can't answer these questions in fragments. You've asked a different question, and you asked, first of all, but is it possible to... You raised the issue of the Internet of Things, and I am And then as I tried to answer it, you said other things which make it hard for people to see what I'm saying. And now you're trying to change to a different question.
I'm not
I
changing.
can't do that.
I understand. I don't think I'm changing
I've
it.
got to do one at a time. Let
Okay.
me finish with
Okay.
the Internet of Things.
Okay, let's do that.
You're basically asking the question, can you, one person, stop this disaster? And the answer is, obviously I can't unless other people join in. Okay? I'm not trying to claim to have the powers of a Superman. I'm only telling people about a danger, hoping that they will join in resisting it. But your question effectively assumes that that's not good enough. Either I am so strong that I can defeat the
started
threat,
free software
or
movement.
I can't.
You have.
Well, the point is, how big is the free software movement? That depends on the people who are watching this. They can either join in or not. They can either say no to the non-free devices that are normally malicious in the Internet of Things or not. Most Internet of Things products that I see being offered to consumers are malicious. They talk to the manufacturer's server, which uses them to spy on the customers that buy the products. If you have any sort of self-respect, it should be obvious to you that you don't want that in your house, and you won't let it be in your house. You'll kick it out. But, how many people can I convince? That's up to them. So let's not waste time on an imponderable. We don't know what the viewers of this interview will think. That's up to them. So why should we waste any time asking about it? They'll show us what they think. So I'm more interested in providing them with reasons to think what I'm arguing for, and I may convince some. There's a sex toy which was designed to be controlled remotely over the internet. And that has some nice uses, right?
I have not used it, so I don't know.
Well, I haven't either, but I can envision uses that might be enjoyable. If there are lovers who are not physically near each other, they might find this an enjoyable thing to do. But the only way to send commands to it is through the server belonging to the manufacturer. So I wasn't surprised to find out that the server is spying on the users all the time, and they even built the product for spying. It wasn't an afterthought. It's not that they built it and then they decided to keep track of the data. No, they built it to give them more data. They put in a thermometer, so it will tell them if the product is in contact with a human body. It might even tell them how much contact and what kind of contact. So they designed it for the purposes of spying on people. That should be a crime. Well, this made a scandal to some extent. I don't know whether they're still selling that product. When I saw that product, my first thought was, you can't trust this thing. I don't want it. If people teach themselves to say, whenever they see such a thing, you can't trust that, I won't take it, then we can defeat those things. Now, I see a possibility that the business devices, the things sold, say, for offices and factories, might be better. It's possible that the controllers sold for factories only talk to another, or for offices, only talk to the master controller in the office. And then if they put free software in those, they control it. And if it's not talking to the internet, then at least it's not spying on them. Maybe, in other words, maybe the manufacturers treat businesses better because the businesses have more money.
Right.
But I don't know that that's true. I do know that the examples I've heard of have been in consumer products.
Yes, they call it IoT or industrial Internet of Things. Yes, you're right. They have totally different mechanism, and
Yeah,
it's more
maybe
controlled.
it's more ethical. I have no information about it.
It is because I did some stories in past, and where I talked to people, and you're right about those devices. They are much more controlled
Oh,
than consumer
good
devices.
for those businesses then.
Yes, yes.
They deserve control over their computing, and you and I deserve control over our computing. So I fight for all users of computing to have control over their computing, and it looks like it's going to be a long fight.
So if businesses can have that control, why can't we?
Oh, it's because the manufacturers think they can get away with more mistreatment of individuals. I think the individuals are going to be suckers.
And that is what I was trying to drive in the beginning. That even with IoT device, Internet of Things devices, there can be ways. Just the way businesses don't get tracked, even consumers don't get tracked.
Well, they could. It would certainly be possible to make an ethical device, an ethical computerized appliance, or an ethical thing to control your computerized appliances. But it's not enough to have some free software in there. For instance, if Linux, the kernel, is in there, that doesn't make it ethical.
Right.
Because the criterion is all the software free software? And have you got the source, free software has delivered to you, so you've got all the source code. But there's another problem that happens with these devices, which is they tend to have lousy security. The companies that make them ship one model for a short time and then forget about it. They don't try to maintain the software they delivered. And the users, even when it is free software, the users are not set up to maintain it.
Right.
They're changing the models too fast. We have to change that, and I'm not sure how. But I would guess that those devices also have some software that's not free. And that makes it clearly unjust. There are a few exceptions where all the software is free. There, for instance, there's a Wi-Fi hub called, I think, the Libra CMC, which is runs with free software, and people do upgrade it.
Yes.
You see, free software is the necessary prerequisite for trying to maintain good computing security. And now I'm using security in the standard sense. With non-free software, you can't even try. But just having free software doesn't guarantee good security. Free software has bugs, just as non-free software has bugs.
Right.
Maintaining good security is very hard. But at least you've got to be in a position to try, which means reject the non-free software, which you're not allowed to patch,
Right.
not allowed to debug. It's basically security is hopeless there.
Right. And there has been a lot of discussion even in the Internet of Things space that either through regulation or laws that a consumer should be able to put their own free software on those devices. So even if the vendor either goes out of business or is not interested, at least I should be able to maintain and manage it.
Of course, now I wouldn't wait for the vendor to go out of business or cease to be interested in
The
that product. I'd want the
first
free
day.
software from the first day,
Yes.
or I wouldn't have the thing.
Yes.
I would distrust it.
Yeah, but it's like one step at a time. That's
right.
what I
Well,
do.
sure. I mean, if they did that, that would to some extent redeem it, although I would still stay away from those things. Once I was staying in a house where there was an Alexa device. I unplugged it. I didn't want it listening to me. I don't trust it at all.
Yes. Did you hear the case where Amazon handed over Alexa to the law enforcement authorities? There was a murder case. So that also means that maybe even if it says that when you use the hot word Alexa, it starts listening, then what is the point? Why are you giving that device to law enforcement?
Well, I don't know what it means to give the device.
Give the device means that it may have captured audio. That
I
means
see. So they handed it over in case it had captured some commands.
Amazon knows that what it's not free software, so Amazon knows what it captures or not captures.
Right.
So,
well, the things that follow the word Alexa, they're transmitted to Amazon servers, right? So Amazon might have handed over that data from its own servers. I don't want Amazon to get any
Yes,
data from
I
me.
don't trust them at all. And I don't even know whether they are listening and capturing all the time and then using machine learning capability, they just
I
start.
don't know. I
Yes.
don't want them to get any data from me. This is why I say what we need in order to take a real bite out of massive surveillance is laws that systems have to be designed not to accumulate data about people.
Right.
We have to limit the collection of data, not merely regulate how it will be used.
Yes, yes. And users should have total control. If you are willing to compromise, but if I don't want, at least I
No,
should be.
actually, no. Systems should not be allowed to ask you for excessive data. Any service that's offered should be required by law to be designed to ask for the least possible
Right.
data for that service.
Right.
In other words, the user's consent is not an excuse for spying on people. This principle is necessary because companies have become adept at manufacturing consent. Now, I'm deliberately taking a term that Chomsky used to refer to consent to government decisions, and here it's consent to a surveillance practice. But companies are so good at maneuvering almost everybody into consenting that they've taught people mostly not even to care how much they're being snooped on.
Okay.
And I think, therefore, we need to put an end to this manufacture of consent by saying you're not even allowed to ask for certain data if it isn't necessary for the basic service you're doing. So, for instance, if the basic service is providing transportation to people, we know that can be done without requiring them to identify who they are. Therefore, the law should say you're forbidden to try to find out who the passenger is.
Right, that's true. Hopefully,
Which means you have to accept cash payment too,
Yes.
because if the user has to pay through a non-anonymous method, you'd find that the service would find out who that user is. So they must be required to accept cash.
Yes, I think we need a lot of changes, a lot of positive changes to build the kind of society we really want to live in.